In this video, we are going to create a typing game using HTML, CSS and JavaScript. We are going to use vanilla JavaScript, no library or plugin. So here on the top part, we have some text. You can have as much text as you want. I have just a little bit for demo purpose. And then we have an input and we can type here. And as you can see, this green line here, this is actually our progress bar. So as our time goes, the progress bar will start to shrink. Right now it is not shrinking. That is because the game has not started. But if I type something, the progress bar will start, and before it shrinks down to 0, we have to type this. And as you can see, the text is also highlighted. So if I type YPE, as you can see, this also gets highlighted. And if I were to type something wrong, so let me try to type something wrong here. So TYPO, something like this. As you can see, this is now red. So this is indicating that we have typed wrong, and this part indicates that we have typed correct. And when the time is over, it also alerts that the time is over. Okay, let me try to type this out before the time runs out, although I can't type that fast. So let me try it. So type this as fast as possible. And there, as you can see, when we type that successfully before the time runs out, it says well done. So this is what we're going to create. So let's get started. So first we're going to create an index.html, and then we're going to create a main.js, and we also need a style.css. Now in the HTML, let's create our basic markup. So we're going to say exclamation mark tab. Let me close the sidebar, and let's link our CSS file and JavaScript file. So we're going to say link and our style.css, and let's do the same for our JavaScript. So script source equals to main.js, like so. So let's open it up with our live server. So right click and click on open with live server. So this is how our page looks like. This is an empty page. So in this page, we are going to have 3 elements: a div that will contain the text, a progress bar that will also be a div, and a text area that will work as our input. So let's do that. So first we are going to have a div. Let's give it a class of text, and then we're going to have a div with a class of progress bar. So progress bar, like so. And then we're going to have a text area with the class of input. And we don't need all these attributes, so we can delete them. We only want a placeholder, so we're going to say placeholder, and it will say, let's say, start typing, and let me close it, like so. Save, go to the page, and right now we can only see our progress bar because the other 2 divs are currently empty. So let's style them in our CSS. So first thing we're going to do is target everything, and we're going to say margin. So margin equals to 0. Padding will also be 0, and we're also going to say box sizing to border box, like so. So if we save this, as you can see, now that white space that we had here and here is gone. So now let's target our body. Let's choose a color. Oops, it should be body. And let's choose a background color. So we're going to say background color, and let me paste the color that I have copied. So Ctrl V and Ctrl S, save it. So this is the color we have. So this is pretty close to what we had in our finished project. Okay, so now let's target our div with a class of text and input. So text and input, both of them will have a display of block. So display of block, and they will have a width of 100%. So width of 100%. If I save it, now the text area spans across the entire width. We're also going to say border to none and outline to none. So border none and outline to none. Save. So now we don't have this border, and if we click on it, no outline appears. Okay, now let's also give them some padding. So we're going to say padding of, let's try 1 em. And finally, let's say they will have a height of 50 viewport height. So height of 50 viewport height. Save. So now the div with the class of text spans half of the height, and the text area spans across the rest of the height. Now let's target our progress bar. So let me go to the HTML and copy the class. Ctrl C and go to CSS and paste it. Ctrl V, and this will have a height of, let's say, 10 pixel, and the background color can be green. So let's say background color of RGBA. So RGBA, the red will be 0. The green will be 100%, so 255, and the blue will be, let's say, 0, and the opacity will be 1. Save. Actually, let's make it RGB, not RGBA, since we are not using the opacity anyways. So RGB 0, 255, this should be 255 and 0. Save. So this is how our progress bar looks like, but now we have this little bit of scrolling space. That is because the input and text area is taking the 100% of the height, and this have the 10 pixel extra height. So instead of saying 10 viewport height, let's say calc, and instead of saying full 50 viewport height, we are going to say 50 viewport height minus 5 pixel. Okay, it should be calc, so calc, save. And now we don't have any scrolling space, so they together is taking the entire height. So here let's try to add some text. So here let's say lorem 10 and tab, so 10 words. So this is how that looks like. So let's style it a little bit more. So let's say our body will have some font family. So you can use any font you want. So let me go with this one, save. And let's say the font size will be, so font size will be, let's try 1.2 em. And the font weight will be bold. So font weight of bold, save. And yeah, this should be good enough. And I think this will be all for our HTML and CSS. But one thing is, we won't have just plain text here. So if we are to go to our finished project, and let me refresh and right click and click on inspect, as you can see, every character here is wrapped inside a span. So that is what we are going to do. The reason behind using a span for every character is then we can simply give our span a background color of green or red if we type something correct or wrong. So as you can see, if we type something, they get a class of correct or wrong depending on if we typed it correct or wrong. So let's do that. So let me delete the text. We don't need the text here, so delete and click on save. And this is the text we are going to use. You can use as much text as you want. So let me copy this, Ctrl C, and in the main.js, first we are going to say const str, that will be our string, equals to the string we just copied, that is type this as fast as possible. And then let's target our this div, this progress bar, and this input. So we're going to say const, and this one has a class of text, so we're going to say text equals to the document.querySelector. So query selector, and this will have a class of text, so dot text. Then we have this text area with a class of input, so let's do that. So let's target that. So we're going to say const input equals to document.querySelector.input, and finally we have a progress bar, so we're going to say const progress bar equals to document.querySelector progress bar, like so. Save. And then we're going to create a function, so function that will, and we are going to call it populate text. So populate, that will take some text as its argument. Let's call it string, so str. And what this will do is take a string as its argument, so for example this string, and for each character in the string, this will create a span that will have this character in that span, and then append the span in the text. So let's do that. So first we are going to say string. So first we are going to split the string. So if we were to say string dot split and split it by nothing, we should get an array of every character. So let me just console log this for you. So Ctrl X and console log this. So console.log string.split, save it and click on inspect. And we have to call this function also. So let's say populate text and pass our string, save. So as you can see, now we have an array of all the elements, all the characters. So now we can loop through them. So we're going to use the map function. So we're going to say this dot map. And then for each of the letter, we're going to run this function. Letter or character, whatever you want to call it. So we're going to create a span. So we're going to say const span equals to document.createElement span. Then our span will have inner text of the letter, and finally we can append the span to our div that has a class of text, which is this text. So if you have to save it, as you can see, this says type this as fast as possible, but every character or letter is wrapped in a span like so. So this is what we want. Now we also want to store these span elements inside an array, so we're going to say const character elements, so char else for elements equals to, by default it will be an array, and whenever we create this span and append it to our text, we are also going to say character elements dot push span. So we also have all these span elements inside this character elements array. Okay, now let's add a event listener to our text area. So we're going to say input dot add event listener. So input dot add event listener, and we're going to listen for the key up event. So we're going to say key up, and then we're going to run this function. So inside that, first let's get the value of our text area. So we're going to say const for value equals to input dot value. Let's try to just console log this. So console dot log, and we're going to console log our value. Save it and try to type something here. Let's say hello. So as you can see, as we type something, it gets console logged here. So again, we're going to convert what we have in our text area into an array and then loop through it. So we're going to say val.split. So split it by nothing, so empty string. So this will convert it into a character array, and then we're going to loop through it. So this time we're going to get the letter and the index. We need the index. So then we're going to run this function. Now inside this function, we are going to check. So for example, this h here has a index of 0, and in this string the index 0 is this one, so this t. So if this h and this t matches, then we have typed correct, otherwise we have typed incorrect. So let's check it in our function here. So here we are going to say if letter equals to character elements at that index dot inner text, or we can simply say string dot inner text, string index dot inner text. So if our letter is same as what we have in our string, in that case we have typed correctly. So we're going to say character elements and get the span at that index. We're going to give it a class of correct, otherwise we can give it a class of wrong. So else we're going to give it a class of wrong. So let's say wrong. And now let's create these classes in our CSS. So let's create this correct class first. So correct, let's paste it, Ctrl V, and let's say this will simply have a background color of some light green color. So let's try this. Yeah, this should be good enough. Let's also say dot wrong. Let's give it a background color also. So let's say light red. So let's try this, save it. Okay, let's try to type something. Let's say TYP. Everything seemed to be wrong. Let's see why is that. So here we're going to say if letter is equals to string I dot inner text. Actually this should be just string I, not string I dot inner text. Sorry. Save it and let's try to type it again. So TY, as you can see, if we type correct, it gets highlighted to green, otherwise it gets highlighted to red. So if we were to press some backspace, as you can see, the highlight does not change. So again we're going to create another function. So let's say function, we're going to call it reset. We're going to call it reset character elements. So reset char else. So char else. What this will do is loop through all the character elements and remove the class of correct and wrong if they had them already. So save it. So let's try to type something again. So as you can see, if we type something, it gets highlighted. If we press backspace, okay, we need to call this function again, sorry. So we need to call that function here also. So let's call it reset character elements. Save. And let's try to type something. So let's say type this as fast. Let's type wrong. And let's try to press backspace. As you can see, the highlight also gets removed accordingly. So let's say type this as fast as possible. This as fast as possible. And as you can see, now everything is highlighted. So now what we're going to do is, after this highlight, we're going to check if we have same amount of character here and here. So the character count of this value is same as the character count of our string. That means we have typed as much character we had in our original text in our input. So let's do that. So we're going to say if, we're going to say val.length. So val.length equals to our string.length. Now we might have typed same amount of characters in our text area, but we might have some error also. So we need to keep count of our errors. So we're going to say const error count. Actually we have to make it let, since we're going to be changing it. So we're going to say let error count equals to, by default it will be 0, and for every character that we type wrong, the error count will be increased by 1. So we're going to say error count ++. And then in the check, we're also going to check and if our character count is 0. So if we have typed same amount of characters that we have in our string in our input and we don't have any error, that means we have successfully typed what we had in our text. So that means our game is finished. So we have finished the games. In that case, we can say alert well done. So alert, let's say well done. and let's try to type it here. So let's say type as fast as possible. So type this as fast as possible, as fast as possible. Actually, let's try to type something wrong first. So let's say FLE dot, and as you can see, it does not alert that well done, although we have same amount of characters in both case. But let's try to type the correct one here. So let's say possible, and if we type everything correctly, it says well done. So it is working. So now we have to just make this progress bar work. So for that, we're going to go to our CSS, and let's say our progress bar will have an animation. So let's say animation, let's call it animate, and the duration can be, let's say, 10 seconds, and the ease-in function will be linear. We need to have a semicolon here, so let's create that function now. So let's say at keyframes, so at keyframes, let's call it animate, and at 0% it will have a width of 100%, and at 100% this will have a width of 0, so no width at all. So save it. So as you can see, progress bar is also decreasing in size, but in our finished project you'll see when we have a lot of time, the progress bar is green, and when we have a less amount of time, it first goes blue and then it goes to red. So let's also do that. So we're going to say at 0% the background color will be green, so we can just copy this color. So Ctrl C, Ctrl V, and at 100% the background color will be red. So let's say the color will be red. The color will be 255 for the red and 0 for the green and blue. Save. Let's go back and click on refresh. As you can see, it starts at green, but as it goes, this is the color we get, and then we get red. But at middle point we want yellow. So let's also add another keyframe. So at 50%, the width will be 50%, but the color will be yellow. So let's choose this yellow color. I think this should be good enough. Save. And yeah, this should be good enough, but our progress bar won't have any animation by default, so we can remove this. Our progress bar will have an animation only if it has a class of active. So we're going to say progress bar dot active. So if our progress bar has a class of active, only then we're going to have this animation. So paste it. So now we don't have any animation here, so we're going to add in, we're going to give our progress bar a class of active as soon as we type something in our input. So let's do that. So for that, we're going to have some variable here. So first variable we're going to have is a timer. So we're going to say let timer, by default it will be null, and whenever we type something here, we're going to check if exclamation mark timer. So if our timer has not started, in that case we can assume that our game has not started. So let's call a function called start, and let's create that function. So let's say function start. What this function will do is say timer. So timer equals to set timeout. So set timeout. So this function will run after 10 seconds. So 10,000, because it works with millisecond. We're saying 10,000, that is because our animation also runs in 10 seconds. So that is why we're saying 10 seconds. So in this function we can simply say alert, and we're going to say time's up, and we're also going to say our progress bar will have a class list of active. So progress bar does class list dot add, and we're going to give a class of active. Save. And then in our check here, we're going to also check if, okay, this should be timeout, not set time. So timeout, like so. And then finally in our check, we're also going to say clear timeout. So clear timeout, timer, save. And now as you can see, our progress bar is not running, but let's try to start typing. So as you can see, if I type T, the progress bar starts, and the color is also changing. So let's try to keep typing, and after the time is over, it should say time over. So time's up, and this time let's try to type it before the time ends. So let's try to type it. Okay, before that, another thing is, in our finished project, if we were to click on refresh, as you can see, our input area is focused by default. So let's do that. So here we're also going to say input.focus. So input.focus dot focus. So now If we refresh, our input will be focused by default. Okay, let's try to type this before the time ends. So let's say type this as fast as possible. And as you can see, it says well done. So everything is working. Now you can simply change this text to whatever you want and this game will still work. So if you think you have enjoyed this video, then consider leaving a like and subscribe to this channel. This really helps me a ton, and I'll see you next time.